Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. In a world where business is ruled and dominated by men, our guest has stood out tall, not in height or physical strength, but in success and determination. Yasmin Belo-Osagie is the co-founder of She Leads Africa, a social enterprise she built with Afua Osie in 2013. 6 years later, they've built a community that helps young African women achieve their dreams, their professional dreams, with engaging online content and Pan-African events.
Thank you for joining us. You must be exhausted because this was Slave Festival, which happened yesterday.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
So I'm really glad. We're so glad you could join us this morning.
I mean, but then I found out that you guys are here every morning, every Sunday, super early, so I didn't really think I have an excuse.
But tell us, I mean, for people that this is new to them, they don't know what She Leads Africa stands for or what She Leads Africa means. Tell us what the community is and building that network.
Of course. So, I mean, you know, She Leads Africa, we describe ourselves as a media company and a community where we're focused on young African women. So our typical demographic is women between the ages of 18 to 35. We focus slightly more on urban areas. And of course, a lot of the content we create is digital. So of course, it's again focused on women who at the very least have access to internet. I think we very much see ourselves as part of an ecosystem of a range of different organizations that are thinking about, okay, what are the different ways in which we can tackle the inequality that women experience across the continent. We focus, I think, a lot more on business and career advice, and I think that just reflects the background of myself and my co-founder. We're both kind of ex-consultants, people who've been in the professional space, who worked in small and medium businesses. And so I think that thinking about how we work with young women to help them grow their businesses, grow their careers, you know, we do a lot of like financial wellness advice, so thinking about how do you invest, thinking about how do you save. We've also started doing a lot of health and wellness content. So we like to create content and experiences that are actually, you know, good for young women, but that are also really, really fun. So we always try to make sure that we're balancing learning and fun, which is why you see things like Slave Festival, where we have some amazing speakers, very, very, you know, educative, all the way from people like the CEO of Siemens Nigeria. We've had people from Google, we have entrepreneurs, we also have influencers, and we had the crew from the men's club, because the whole idea is that you should learn, but it should also be, you know, fun. You can dance, you know, you drink if you want to, you have fun, but there's also some learning content at the end.
So I wanted to ask you what actually inspired you to start She Leads Africa, then also talk about the Slave Festival, which was really about, like you said, learning, networking, and having fun. So take us through, like, the learning. Who are the people who were teaching those master classes that you had? The networking, what is speed networking? Because I
Yeah, so we have a full range of speakers. So yesterday we had somewhere between like 50 and 75 different speakers. Wow. And what we try to do is give different levels of engagement and interaction with speakers. So we have the main stages where, you know, it's people like, you know, Mama Burner, who's talking about like building a career in the music industry. She manages her son, who's one of the most successful music artists, I think, on the continent. And she's speaking to a group of about 300 people. We also have the smaller masterclasses where we had people like Tosin, who's very focused on thinking about how you actually invest and save your money. And that's to a much smaller group of women, maybe about 100 people. We also then have our leadership circles where we have amazing people like, you know, Bookie, who works at Travel Start, focusing on marketing, and they are groups of 10 women. So you actually get much more interaction and engagement with the speakers that you would get if they were, you know, a huge speaker in front of a huge audience. So we try to make sure that we're giving people different levels of interaction. Some people want that conversation with their speakers. Some people just want to sit and listen. And we want to make sure that there is something for everyone.
And speed networking?
Well, speed networking. So one of the things that we've actually found is that, you know, young women really, really want to connect with each other. They want to meet other young women who are growing, who are hustling, who are building their businesses. And so we want to provide an opportunity for that. So speed networking is very simple. The way it works is, you know, it's one group of people on one side, one group of people on the other side, and, you know, you're able to speak to each other for kind of 2 to 3 minutes. It's a very quick introduction, who you are, you know, where you're from, what industry you're in, and then we continue. You kind of just move a chair down, a chair down, a chair down. And usually, of course, like 2 minutes is too short to like build a relationship with anyone. But the idea is that they've broken the ice. The festival is 9 hours long. They're gonna run into each other. And so what we find is speed networking allows for the beginning of a relationship, because oftentimes it's a bit awkward to walk up to someone who you don't know and say, hi, my name is. But if you introduce people in that type of environment, then they're much more comfortable to continue these conversations later on.
And I guess if you run into someone, if you run into them later, and you say, "Oh, we were
Every conference should start off that way.
I think so. Especially if it's an all-day conference, just start with that in the morning, and then throughout the day you can sort of say, "Oh, we met at the." And it sort of gives you an opening to continue.
100%.
And then sometimes okay, I met her, I need to go back.
I need to.
There's that too.
Exactly, because I find that oftentimes, when you go to conferences, and for some people who are much more introverted, like, you're just nervous to introduce yourself to people. So I think that if the organizers, do the work of introducing people, or creating spaces where it's not awkward to introduce yourself, it's much more fun.
Somebody thought up the whole name tag thing, so this is taking it to the next level.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, one of the things that we did this year is we had a mobile application where once you bought your ticket, you could download it, and people actually started connecting before the event.
Oh, fantastic.
And so we would always say, kind of, when you join the app, introduce yourself, where you're coming from, what industry you're in. And we found people, because we had a lot of people coming from different states, different countries. So someone would be like, "Hey, I'm coming from Benin, like, who's coming as well?" And like, people actually pulled together, came in together. There was one girl who put up a post that said, "Oh, I'm coming alone," and 100 people responded saying, "You're coming alone, like, let us know when you come. We would love to connect with you. We would love to meet you." And I think that sort of stuff is really exciting.
What I love about this is the fact that the way you've built this sort of community and is really keeping in mind people that are introverted that might not want to be in some of these very one-on-one stages, but want to go into just sort of like, I'm here to listen, and then people that want to interact and people that want to share. It's really intimidating if you're an introvert and you go to some of these big conferences.
Exactly.
You can't just walk up to random people and say, "Here's my card." Bridge that.
Definitely. Myself and my co-founder are strong introverts. I think we're mindful of these problems.
You're serving your people.
Exactly.
We're going to go on a quick break, but when we come back, we still want you to answer what inspired both of you to start this company, and then also talk about equality and...
Definitely.
Can we take one question quickly before the break? Tell us what inspired She Leads Africa.
It's a somewhat longer story, but I'll try to be quick. So my co-founder has actually been working on issues around, female equality and giving young women access for a really long time. So she's originally from Ghana, but she grew up in the States. And she used to work in an organization called Emily's List, which focuses on young women who want to go into politics. And so she was a campaign manager for a young woman in her late 20s, who was like trying to run for, I think, like Congress. And so she's been interested in this space for a really, really long time. So when she moved to Nigeria, we worked together at a consulting company called McKinsey & Company. And she said to me, "Hey, like, I go to all these like startup events, and I find that like I typically don't see very many women."
That thought, Okay,
we'll continue. We'll stay short.
After the break for the rest of the story.
Thank you.
Please stay with us. Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. We're still with Yasmin Belo-Osagie, the co-founder of She Leads Africa, a social enterprise that she built with her partner, Afua Ose, and convener of yesterday's Slave Festival. But we're talking before the break about you and Afia, how you got together and started She Leads Africa.
I think what I was saying before the break is that, we met working together at McKinsey & Company, and when Afua was getting really into the startup ecosystem in Nigeria, and she'd be going to different events, and she would oftentimes not see a lot of women entrepreneurs pitching. And she would ask them, she's like, "What's going on? Where are the women?" And you hear the same thing, "No one applied, like, we couldn't find them." And she was just like, "This doesn't make any sense. I've seen so many amazing women building businesses." So it's like, it can't be an issue of you not finding them. It must be an issue of you're not speaking to them. And so we actually started off as a pitch competition with the idea being that, we wanted to find like amazing women across the continent who are building businesses and thinking about seeing how we can give them visibility, access to mentors, and then also some funding as well. And that was about 4 years ago. And then over time, I think we started transitioning more into, well, we don't want to just be doing the competition because you do that once a year, and what else do you do for the rest of the year? And so that's when we started thinking of new event concepts. That's when we started thinking about, okay, how do we continue to create, content, educative material, creating opportunities for people to connect and meet with each other digitally as well as offline as well.
How big is the community now?
So right now we have a community, it's crazy, of around 500,000 to 600,000 young women.
Wow.
And they're from all over. I mean, Nigeria, just because there are a lot of Nigerians in Africa.
Sure. In the world.
Yeah, in the world, exactly, is, you know, at least kind of 30% of our population. But I think Kenya is very well represented. South Africa is very well represented. You know, I'm half Ghanaian, Afra's Ghanaian, so we want our Ghana people also to be represented. But it's a really diverse, you know, mix of people.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So, I mean, one of the issues that, and I mean, obviously the response that SLA has had to respond to is really this issue around equality, gender representation. World Economic Forum last said that there's about 200 years before we could really have real gender equality when it comes to men and women. How do you feel that this new generation of women that you're working with are approaching the issue around gender equality, especially in the workplace?
So as I think about kind of the women in our community, I think that our generation, I think, is much more kind of comfortable complaining, if I'm being honest, and complaining and being vocal about our problems and speaking about the challenges that we're having. If I think about my mom's generation, I think that there was much more, I think, glorification of struggling quietly, whereas I feel like our generation, we're like, no, we will complain all the way. And in some ways, I mean, that's a good, sometimes it can be negative, I feel like, with everything, but I think it's also a good thing in that we're not willing to say this is just the way the world is, or kind of this is just how it is, so like suck it up and just like get through it. I find that we tend to be much more comfortable saying, hey, this isn't okay, I want this to change, and kind of pushing against that. But I think, you know, what's really important to me is that, you know, we focus on the female audience, but I think it's also really important to understand that, you know, this issue of fighting for women's equality, it's an ecosystem approach, right? There's the work that we do, which is like helping women get information, building networks, but there is policy work that needs to be done. There's stuff that needs to be done on the finance side. It's like there can't be enough organizations like working in this space, and everyone is going to look at it from a different way. We focus on kind of 18 to 35, live in urban areas. The very fact that we're digital means that there is some kind of income gap, because not a lot of like very low income people in Nigeria have access to internet. Sure. So there have to be people who are working at it saying, hey, I'm going to focus on women in rural areas. I'm going to focus on women in, you know, slum areas. It's like, there's so much work that needs to be done that every time we see a new women's organization, we're like, yes, like, because there's, you can't, I think, underestimate how big the problem is, and so there's so much work to do.
I mean, 200 years, that's a long...
It's
that's intimidating.
Yes, and that's why we can't accept it, and more people like this need to be in the world.
But you said that your generation is a lot more vocal about what's wrong, so be vocal. What is wrong? What have you found to be the real issues confronting the women?
Sure. I'm like, where do I start? Okay. So, I mean, when we initially defined it, we'd said that, look, there's something around access to information and access to networks. Whether that's like other young women like yourself, or it's being able to access, you know, mentors who are more senior to you. We know a lot of kind of like the most well-known or senior people in the corporate space, in the entrepreneurial space, are men. We know that people tend to kind of mentor and invest in people who are similar to them. So just from the bat, women are kind of having, you know, that gap in terms of access to mentorship and support, the sponsorship that you kind of need to move forward. I think there's also a huge, you know, funding gap in terms of the ways in which women entrepreneurs are actually able to access money. But I'm sure that you will likely find that even in the corporate space, there's most likely huge gaps in terms of what women are paid versus what guys are paid. Now, if you dig into that...
In Nigeria?
I'm very certain. Like, we haven't done the data in Nigeria, but I'm pretty certain that it is the same in Nigeria.
Really? Because I would have thought that's a Western
places.
phenomenon.
I don't think so. I would disagree, because a lot of the times, the way, like, you negotiate your salary, it's what's offered to you, but then it's also what you negotiate. And we find that even in Nigeria, women tend to negotiate slightly less than guys are. And so if you assume that negotiation is the thing that allows you to push up your salary, other than just what's offered to you, you'll likely find that there is a bit of a gap. And it's interesting because we're about to start thinking about how we do more research, so we actually uncover this data.
I'll be looking out for that.
Exactly, no, definitely. And so I think that if you then think about, okay, why is it that women tend to get funded less? Then there's a stereotype issue as to like, hey, are women good at actually building businesses? Like, can you be a young woman and absorb a $10 million loan, a $20 million loan, this, that, and the third? That then goes to the stereotype issue of what do we as African societies think about as the appropriate place of a woman? And so that's another thing. And then you then have all the like sexual violence, like violence at home, like these are all real things that it just makes it more difficult for you to wake up in the morning and get to work if you're having to like deal with all these issues. And so that's why I say oftentimes with women equality, most of the people who are talking about it are women. And there are definitely things that we can do as a female community to kind of continue to push ourselves forward. But at the end of the day, we definitely do need to make sure that there is policy work, that, you know, government is stepping in, because at the end of the day, if like young women are allowed to get married at 10, 11, 12, and you're having your first kid at 13, 14, like, where do you begin to start building like your
we can't
career?
chip away at that 200 years.
Exactly.
Case,
And so I think that, you know, we always say like we are in an ecosystem. SLA is doing one thing, but we definitely agree that there is so much more work that needs to be done, and this isn't just like a women's conversation.
You brought up something around content, the type of content you're creating, and wellness was one of them, the things that, one of the new pillars that you guys have added. You also touched on issues around sexual assault and sexual abuse, and there's a huge issue around mental health.
Definitely.
We just finished doing in another organization I'm working on. Doing a call for entry for stories. And one of the things that I kept on finding was so many people were talking about mental health and suicide. How do you find the women on the platform and community approach this issue?
Sure. And I think just given the size of women that we have, you have women who approach it in multiple different ways. I think, you know, some are much more...
I guess how are you approaching it too?
Okay, got it. So how are we approaching it? So I think that the first thing is just like making sure that people understand the problem, understand what to do, and understand what their options are. Because I think, you know, part of the challenge is that, you know, there are levels to this mental health problem thing, right? There are some people who don't even acknowledge that depression exists, or that when you're struggling, it's okay to speak to someone, you know, or that there is medical help that you can get, like, given how you're feeling. And so I think actually the first thing is just people being comfortable talking about it and understanding that this is a problem and understanding that you can get help. Because I think that for a lot of people, it's, well, I'm sad, so it must just be me, so I'm just going to sit and mull in my sadness. But I think one of the things that we want to start doing moving forward is, like making sure that people understand this is a problem, this is a medical issue, in the same way that you have malaria or you have a flu, you also have these medical issues which are legitimate and you need to feel comfortable speaking out about it. I think the next thing that we're going to be trying to do moving forward is creating a lot more in small groups to gather and speak to each other. Because I think that, you know, we have this theory that like depression is a white person's thing, but I think the more that you hear from other young women, and I think I know Betty Rabel right now is speaking a lot about the struggles that she's had with depression, and I think seeing people who are like you admitting to some of these challenges, saying that it's something that they faced, is extremely powerful and makes other people feel more comfortable that it's not something that is, you know, shameful to say, like, hey, I'm really struggling right now, I need help. And so we definitely want to make sure that we're giving people opportunities in these small group settings to meet and speak with other young women. And hopefully that starts, like, you know, working towards, you know, breaking down the stigma of mental health. And I think the final thing, and this is something that we can't definitely not go it alone, is thinking about how do we connect people to resources that can actually help them. And so I think one of the things that we're doing right now is researching a lot more, okay, if you're a young woman in Nigeria, you're in Rwanda, you're in Kenya, you're in South Africa, where can you go for help? We know that it's not easily accessible, but there are 100%, I know it, and you've already mentioned it, there are organizations out there that are working on it. So we would want to make sure that we're actually able to, you know, partner with them so that when people mention this, we're like, hey, you know, this is okay. You know, what you're saying is legitimate, it matters, and hey, here are a few organizations that you can reach out to that would actually be able to help you, because, you know, we're not medical professionals.
Sure.
So this is what has impressed me. You take such a thorough, such a holistic approach, because even at Slave Festival, you had a yoga session for that health and wellness bit, and you had childcare. Now, you mentioned earlier about, you know, the horror of like teen pregnancy or underage marriage and what have you, and how it affects female entrepreneurs. But then women in their 20s, 30s who have children, it does, it is a bit of a setback, let's face it. So how do you address that?
It's definitely a huge challenge. And it's something I'm really mindful of. I don't have kids, but I just had a nephew. He's now 5 to 6 months, like he's 5 to 6 months old. And my sister went through the process of, you know, she was extremely lucky in that, first of all, she had a company that gave her 6 months maternity leave, which is, for some people, like, they don't get that. I think in terms of what we're doing to tackle it, again, like, our approach has always been, you know, creating content around the issue, learning from, I'm sure, for example, there are women who have been able to find some way of balancing it? Can we take what they've learned and actually share it with other people? I think there's a big information gap in Nigeria, and so we want to make sure that like we're allowing people to share their stories, people can connect with each other, you can learn from other women, you learn tips and tricks, etc., etc. But if I'm going to be honest, I think that there's more work than we could do in terms of actually like speaking to organizations and saying, hey, for someone who's just coming back after kids, here are some of the things that would be helpful to them. Because I think that we can assume that some institutions might not care, but I think that there are a lot of institutions that do care, that are well-meaning, but that don't know how to approach the issue. And so I definitely think that there is space for an organization like ours to actually survey our community and say, hey, what is the support that like you wanted? What is the support that you need? And make sure that we're getting that information in the hands of people who then would be able to, for example, change the ways that organizations and institutions work.
Very cool. Very nice. So now what's next now for SLA? I mean, you have the festival. The festival is going on, especially around policy and engaging with other people that are working on policy. Are you guys able to sort of break into that world as well?
Honestly, it's something that we're still trying to figure out, like the best way to approach it. And I don't have the answer yet. I think one of the things that I've tried to do is just make sure I'm continuing to connect with other people in the ecosystem, because I'm sure someone has somewhat figured this issue out about how do we actually make sure that we are able to, even if we can't do the like creation of policy like work or thinking ourselves, we have a huge community. So if there are people who are doing that who want to, for example, research with our community or speak to young women, then that's something that we can be helpful with. But I don't fully have the answer yet. It's like, how do we actually make sure that government and policy makers listen?
But what can we expect from SLA?
Got it. So I think some of the things that we're doing next is we're going to be testing out some type of, like members club. Because what we found is that, and it will be digital, but like with some offline components, because I think that one of the things that we've realized is people do want more consistent engagement with us. So after events, everyone's always like, so what do I do now? And we're like, I don't know, like on Instagram, follow us.
All right, so but people can find you guys where?
On Instagram is where we're most active, and our website is sheleadsafrica.org. We have newsletters that go out every day, and you can follow us on Instagram on She Leads Africa.
Well, thank you.
Thank you guys so much for having me. Thank you so much. Thank you.